welcome to another episode of the Park2Park podcast, where we compare theme park offerings from coast to coast. We don't always see eye to eye, but in the end, we'll try. I'm your host, CJ, and I'm joined by Alli. Alli, how are you today?
I'm great. I almost choked on a Hot Pocket today, but I recovered nicely.
Well, I'm glad you're alive.
Me too.
Well, thank you for joining us today. This episode, we are talking about the railroad and the monorail.
Yeah, but before we talk about that, we want to cover something that we missed in our last episode, the castle battle. So one of our segments for that, we talked about how many castles are in Disneyland and how many castles are in Walt Disney World. And lo and behold, we missed a castle at Disneyland. When you're in the lobby of Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, there is a miniature version of the Sleeping Beauty castle. So plus one more castle at Disneyland, further cementing the fact that they have more castles there.
Yes, it's a very tiny castle, but there is an exhibit about Disneyland and kind of an overview of what it looks like. And there's the Sleeping Beauty castle there. So boom.
And it counts.
It does count, yes. And you and I were kind of talking about how It's a Small World has representations of like Buckingham Palace and stuff like that, but those are not like Disney princess castles. So we kind of
and they're also two-dimensional versus everything else is three-dimensional.
Right. So we kind of came to the conclusion that those don't count because they're not Disney princess castles, you know? Yeah. All right. So let's move on to today's topic, which we're going to start with the railroad. And, we paired the railroad with the monorail because they're both rides and they're forms of transportation, which is kind of different than other rides around these parks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they both have rails.
They do. Monorail and railroad.
And Alli Rail.
Yeah, your last name. There we go.
Yeah.
So let's start by talking about our favorite things about the railroad. So Alli, why don't you kick us off with your favorite thing about the railroad at both Disneyland and Walt Disney World?
So for both of them, I really like the vibe of the whole thing. Like it's really quaint. It's really historic, and it really feels the closest thing that's left to what Walt Disney really wanted. So that's something that I love about the railroad at both parks. And then full disclosure, I don't know the last time I was on the railroad at Walt Disney World. So shout out to, what's the YouTube channel? You said you liked them.
Resort TV 1. I love them.
Yes, shout out to Resort TV 1 on YouTube for providing us with, not us, providing anybody with access to YouTube with a ride-through video of the Walt Disney World Railroad, because it's been a long time since I've been on it.
It's been a long time for everybody.
Yeah, but even longer for me, because I don't think I went on it in 2016. If I did not do the Grand Circle Tour. I definitely didn't go on it in 2018 because I had a half day at Magic Kingdom, and let's face it, that's not a priority. And then last time I was there, it was closed. So maybe I went on it in 2016, maybe I went on it in 2000, maybe I've never been on it. So I watched a ride through. And then my favorite thing actually applies to both of them. I love going through Splash Mountain and seeing the final show scene from Splash Mountain. And then also at Disneyland, I really love the dinosaurs and the primeval diorama, because that's really unique.
Yeah, that is a really cool feature. I totally agree with you on that. And I'm going to segue into that. That's my favorite thing about Disneyland's Railroad, the primeval diorama. I hear the music in my head. You say primeval diorama and the music just pops into my mind. It's
in everybody's heads now.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
You're welcome for that one. And along with that, just the details along the train route, there's some really cool signage between Toontown and Tomorrowland. I can see that one specific billboard that's back there kind of like right past Small World before you hit the Autopia. I can see that sign in my brain. There's some Mardi Gras stuff near New Orleans Square that I can see right there along the train tracks. Just those little details on the Disneyland train. I really enjoy.
There's the dog house for Indiana,
Yep,
because we named
yep.
the dog Indiana.
Yes, yes. And then at Walt Disney World, just like you, it's been a very long time since I've been on that railroad. It's been closed since 2018. So it's been a very long time for all of us. And I just want to preface this episode. I think this episode is, we've done the most research for just because the train has been closed for so long at Disney World. But my favorite thing about Disney World's railroad is it's a really great form of transportation. Magic Kingdom is a huge park, and when your feet are tired, it's a really good way to get from point A to point B. So that's what I like about the train at Walt Disney World. So with that, let's get into just some facts about the train. So Allie, why don't you tell me about when the train opened at Disneyland?
Yeah, so the train at Disneyland opened in 1955 with the park opening, and it was actually the first operational attraction in the entire park.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and it was closed from 2016 to 2017, about 18 months there to accommodate the Galaxy's Edge construction. Not nearly as long as the Tron coaster construction, but I digress. And then some fun facts. It was originally the Santa Fe and Disneyland Railroad. And when you are in the New Orleans Square station, if you know Morse code, you can interpret the dots and dashes that you hear to be the first two lines of Walt Disney's original dedication speech for Disneyland. And since that refurbishment that reopened the train in 2017, for the first time, the train turns left. It is now an ambi-turner.
I know. And when the time that they were doing that construction, you had already moved to Texas, right?
No, I moved in 2018.
Okay.
So it might have reopened for my last hurrah visit at the end of 2017, but I probably didn't go on it.
Okay. I don't remember how closely you were following like the train news and reopening around then, but they made a huge deal and on the Disney Parks blog and all that stuff about the train turns left. It's the first time the train turns left. Like they were really playing that up.
I mean, it's cool.
It is cool. It's kind of different and funky and like, wow, the train turns left. I just remember that being like a really big deal. So Walt Disney World, just like Disneyland, it's an opening day attraction, 1971, but it has been closed since December 2018 due to that Tron construction. So again, we don't know what kind of changes are going to happen once the train reopens. We kind of try to peek around when we're on the People Mover and over by Goofy's Barnstormer just to see what changes are happening. Nobody really knows, so it's hard to tell what's going on over there.
Maybe
So
it'll turn left.
maybe it'll turn left. We'll never know. No, we'll know eventually. I think it's hard to tell really when they wanted to open it. I think had COVID not happened, I think it probably would have been open by now. But hopefully soon, hopefully soon. So some fun facts about the Walt Disney World Railroad. All the locomotives were discovered in the Yucatan, where they hauled freight and passengers. The four locomotives are the Walter E. Disney, the Roy O. Disney, and the Lily Bell. So obviously named after Walt and Roy. And then the Lily Bell was named after Walt's wife, Lillian, and Roger Brogy. And
I have a question.
yes.
You say that the locomotives were discovered. What does that mean? Were they? Because to me, that reads like Luke pulling the X-wing out of the swamp. I discovered it.
I would have to read more into this, but my historian brain is telling me that, I mean, knowing a lot about Disney history and the way that they do things, they probably sent people down and said, hey, we need to go find some locomotives, go see what you can find. And so they'd go out and look for things, say, oh, we found these trains. Let's bring them back to Disney and restore them and and turn them into something that can be useful for the park. And so they probably found these trains that were not being used anymore or were kind of on their last legs and restored them to be used for the park.
Okay. Yeah, because it reads like nobody knew where they were and they've been abandoned for centuries and then we rediscovered them.
No, I don't think they'd been abandoned for centuries. Nothing
Those
like
trains
that.
haven't been around for centuries, so.
No. Anyways, so Roger Brogy, blah, blah, blah. So let me go back here. The first three locomotives were named after Disney family members, and then Roger Brogy was a Disney Imagineer who helped Walt with his railroad hobby. So there's a connection there to both the Disney family and a big railroad guy in the Disney universe, basically. Another thing you can do relating to trains at Walt Disney World is there's a tour called the Magic Behind Our Steam Trains tour, which is currently on hiatus. A lot of the tours in general at Walt Disney World just haven't returned because of COVID, but this one in particular is not back because of, the train being
Construction.
down. Yeah. There's also a really cool walkway between Fantasyland and Tomorrowland where you can get very close to the train tracks. That, however, is not open because of the train construction, and I'm really hoping that when the train does reopen and the Tron construction is over, I really hope that walkway comes back because that's a really cool walkway, and there's not really a walkway equivalent at Disneyland where you can get that close to the train. It's just really cool photo ops. You can get like right there, right up close next to the train. So there's also something that these two resorts have in common is they have defunct trains that existed, not directly related to the trains as they exist today, but they have defunct trains. So, Allie, tell me about the defunct train in Disneyland.
So it was in Tomorrowland and it was called the Viewliner. And it was in operation for a little over a year from June 1957 to September 1958.
Yeah, it looks really cool. It's like silver. It looks, I mean, if you're around in the 50s, it's like super futuristic looking for the 50s. It looks really awesome.
And now in 2022, it looks like retro future.
Yes. Yes, it looks like it belongs in The Incredibles, basically. And then at Walt Disney World, the Fort Wilderness Resort had its own train as well called the Fort Wilderness Railway that lasted for about 4 years in the 70s. And then the Germany Pavilion has a tiny train that is not defunct. It's just a tiny train village, which
Just nobody can ride it.
no, nobody can ride it. But my son and my husband love going over there. There's a little village set up, little train set up, and I love they decorate it for all of the festivals that go on, like the Flower and Garden Festival, Food and Wine Festival. They get their own tiny decorations too. So if you're a train enthusiast, make sure you go check it out.
It's a train for ants.
A train? What is this? A train for ants?
It needs to be at least 3 times as big for people.
At least. All right, let's talk about how many trains each of these parks have. So, Allie, start us off with Disneyland.
So Disneyland has 5 locomotives, 2 of which were built specifically for Disneyland Park when it opened in 1955. The others are vintage from 1894, 1902, and 1925. There are 4 sets of train cars currently operating, and we'll go into that a little later.
Yeah. And then Disney World, there's 4 vintage narrow gauge steam trains originally built between 1916 and 1928. And looking at these 2 parks, most of them are vintage. The latest ones come from 1955. And that's one of the things that sets Disney apart. These are vintage trains, and I just love that.
Yeah, reduce, reuse, recycle.
Use vintage trains. I think that lends authenticity to the parks.
Yeah,
that's really
absolutely.
Cool. So let's talk about how long the train, like how long does it take to go around? How long is the track? All those good stuff.
Yeah, at Disneyland, it's a 1.2-mile loop. And depending on how many trains are running, it's about 18 to 20 minutes. If there are 4 trains running, it's going to be closer to 20 minutes. If it's 3 trains running, it's going to be more like 18 minutes.
And at Magic Kingdom, it's 1.5 miles, and it takes 20 minutes.
For the Grand Circle Tour.
Yes. And how many stops does Disneyland have?
You've got 4. You have Main Street Station, New Orleans Square Station, Toontown Station, and Tomorrowland Station.
And have those stops had any changes over the years?
Oh boy, have they. So originally there were just 2 stops. It was Main Street Station and Frontierland Station. In 1962, they moved Frontierland Station and they moved it over to New Orleans Square. They finally renamed it the New Orleans Square Station in 1996. So from 1962 to 1996, it was still Frontierland Station, even though it was in New Orleans Square.
That's so weird. Okay, because New Orleans Square didn't open until like the mid 60s, I think. So it moved to its current location in 1962, but New Orleans Square didn't open until a little bit after 1962.
So according to Wikipedia, yes.
Wow. Interesting.
So the Toontown Station, obviously we know Toontown didn't open until the 90s. It was previously the Fantasyland station from 1956 to 1966. It was removed for the placement of It's a Small World following the New York World's Fair. The Videopolis station replaced that in 1988, and then it became Toontownified in 1992.
Yeah, it's very Toontown-ish.
I love Toontown Station.
I do
It feels
too.
like you're in a cartoon. It's so great.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder though with the Toontown refurbishment if they're planning to update that station at all.
Only time will tell.
Yeah, because when you enter Toontown, you go underneath the train tracks and it has
Yes.
a sign that says like "Welcome to Toontown." They've
Population hammer lemon banana.
they've gotten rid of that sign.
No!
Yeah, and it kind of matches the train station. So I wonder if they're going to do anything to the train station. As far as I know, that train station is still open, so I don't know. But I feel like they could whip out a refurbishment of that really easily
Yeah.
without shutting down the train. Like they could just skip over that station or maybe even slowly do it like overnight or something like that.
And then one last note, the Tomorrowland station opened in 1958, and I don't have any other fun facts about that.
Interesting. I know they kind of struggled to open Tomorrowland at the beginning. Tomorrowland was kind of bare in the beginning. So maybe they just neglected the train station. Who knows? Okay, so at Magic Kingdom, there's 3 stations: Main Street, Frontierland, and Fantasyland. At first, it was just Main Street station, and you would just do one big lap around the park until the Frontierland station opened a year later in 1972. It moved from its original location in about like 1990, 1991-ish. It was originally like roughly where Splash Mountain is, but when Splash Mountain opened, they had to move the train station just a little bit, and it's been there ever since. Fantasyland eventually opened in 1988. The station for Fantasyland did. It went through some theming changes and some naming changes a little bit. That area has changed so much over the years. I mean, it was like Mickey's Birthday Land for a while, and then it's kind of gone through this like storybook circus area transformation, but its current form got to where it is in 2012. So it's stayed the same for about 10 years now. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at Magic Kingdom. Just 3 stops, and it travel. With three stops on a 1.5 mile loop, it does take you a pretty far ways around each stop. So that's why I think it's a great form of transportation. All right, next let's talk about like the general route and what you can see on the route. And since it's been a while since we've ridden the train, and it is a very long, it's a long ride. It's not just a quick like jaunt through Fantasyland. It's a long ride. We did watch YouTube for this just to refresh ourselves. So, Allie, why don't you generally describe what you can see on the train route at Disneyland?
I did not actually watch YouTube for the Disneyland
Oh,
Railroad.
snap.
So I referenced Wikipedia and I referenced my memory just because we've done the train so many times at Disneyland.
Yeah, we have. It's true.
So the journey is narrated the entire time. Well, maybe not the entire time. There are moments
Most
of silence,
of the time.
but
There's moments of silence.
For all the right turns. Yeah. Anyways, so starting from Main Street, you cross a small bridge and go through Adventureland, and be careful, there's a panther.
You know what? Sometimes the panther isn't there. Sometimes he's missing.
He's just really well camouflaged.
Well, sometimes there's this rock, and you can tell there's supposed to be something there. It would be like if Pride Rock didn't have Simba on it. You know?
Maybe he's just napping.
In the bushes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Audio animatronics have to sleep too, CJ.
Okay,
why do you think
fine.
the park closes every night?
Okay. Go on.
From there, you go through a short tunnel before you arrive at New Orleans Square Station, where you can hear that Morse code speech that I mentioned before. Then you go behind the Haunted Mansion through a tunnel, and then through Splash Mountain with that nice view of the final show scene. You cross some trestle bridges and the rivers of America before you land in Toontown Station.
And that's where you make that left turn over the rivers of America.
You turn left over the rivers of America. Then you go behind the Small World facade, across an access road, and under the monorail tracks before stopping at Tomorrowland Station. From there, it's a trip back in time as you enter the primeval world. And you go through the Grand Canyon diorama and see the dinosaurs before you roll back into Main Street Station.
Yeah. So for our Walt Disney World friends who maybe are not familiar with the It's a Small World attraction at Disneyland, it's the exterior of the attraction is outside. It's not inside like it is at Walt Disney World. So when we say it goes behind the Small World facade, like the whole entry for the attraction is completely outside. So you board the boats outside and the facade is huge. It's like 2 to 3 times the size of, like, picture the clock. It's massive compared to Walt Disney World's version. So you go like through the facade basically.
Yeah, but there's no shade in the line for It's a Small World, which sucks.
Yeah, it really does. They've tried to plant some trees and it's just
they haven't quite matured yet. They're still small trees.
Well, I mean, they kind of have, but there's just not that many. There's more, there's a lot of switchbacks and not enough trees, essentially. Anyways, the primeval world is very cool. There's a lot of dinosaurs, and for our Walt Disney World friends, if you're familiar with the Universe of Energy attraction that used to be at Epcot, those scenes are very, very similar.
Yeah, same vibes.
Yeah, same vibes for sure. So at Walt Disney World, if you're going from Main Street to Frontierland, you see a lot of bushes and shrubbery. There's some small set pieces here and there. You cross a small bridge near the backstage area of Adventureland. You enter a small tunnel behind the Pirates building. You can see the roof of the Pirates building, and then you can see the beginning of the parade route near Splash Mountain. You like see glimpses of Splash Mountain. Then you enter Splash Mountain where you see that same finale scene like in Disneyland, and then you stop at the Frontierland station. Then from Frontierland to Fantasyland, you get an awesome view of Big Thunder. You're like right on top of the ride. It's super cool. If you have kids who are maybe afraid to go on Big Thunder, this is a great spot to show them what Big Thunder is like. You can see the ride in action right there. You also get a really good view of the rivers of America and a glimpse of Tom Sawyer Island. You see some more shrubbery and trees, and you get some show scenes along the rivers of America, like wildlife and some Native American scenes. And then from Fantasyland to Main Street, and this stretch is probably going to change given the Tron construction. We just don't know right now. But you can see Goofy's Barnstormer. You get a great view of that walkway leading from Fantasyland to Tomorrowland. You can see the Tomorrowland Speedway and the People Mover. And presumably, it looks like a tunnel is being constructed like underneath or through Tron. Can't really tell right now. And then if you look outside of Magic Kingdom to the left, you see the Contemporary Resort and some of those backstage roads that cast members and us locals use when we don't want to deal with some of the traffic leaving the resort sometimes. And throughout the whole journey, you hear narration about the park.
What really struck me when I was watching that ride through was, you're on the stretch from Fantasyland to Main Street, and you look towards the hotel, and it's just grass. There's no fence. There's no barrier of any sort. It's like you could just run. If the train stopped, you could jump out and you could just run to the Contemporary. It's wild.
Yeah, and nothing's stopping you except like maybe a gator in the pond, I guess. I don't know. And this is a big difference between Disney World and Disneyland in general. I mean, Disneyland, they talked a lot in the beginning how they built up a berm when they were building the park. They pushed the dirt out and built up a berm. And when you're riding on the train, if you look out towards the outside, you can see that dirt berm that they built, right? Nowadays, they've covered it with trees and bushes and stuff, but you can still see that they've literally built up a boundary for the park, so you don't see the outside world.
Yeah, it's so weird.
Yeah, it is weird. So let's talk about the seating arrangements. Alli, what's the seating arrangements like on the train?
So depending on what's running, you have a mix of side-facing and front-facing seats. It's about half and half. It used to be mostly front-facing, but the Retlaw 1 configuration was retired in 1974, and that was the third front-facing. So you have 2 front-facing and 2 side-facing configurations.
Yeah, and by side-facing, you mean like facing the park.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're riding on the train, like if you're going through the primeval diorama set, you're looking at the set pieces.
Yeah, you're actually facing it. You don't have to turn your head to look at it.
Yeah. I feel like when I ride the train at Disneyland, that's mostly the seating configuration I get most of the time.
It's honestly my preferred seating configuration. It's
Yeah.
easier to see everything. You don't get a crick in your neck.
Yeah, and there's not much to see on the other side anyways. It's the
Yeah.
berm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I guess now you make a left turn, like
It's kind of
everything
exciting.
everything changed when you can make a left turn.
Yeah. Meanwhile, at Magic Kingdom, there is no sideways seating like that. Everything is exactly like the parking lot tram, where most of the rows are facing forward, except for the very front row, which faces everybody else, which is kind of fun. It's a little unique. Strollers do have to be folded to get on the train at both parks. There is wheelchair accommodations. There's a special lift. I will say, I know at Disneyland, we didn't specifically look into this, but I know at Disneyland at the Main Street station, there's no ramp to get up to the top. Remember that?
Yeah, now that you mention it, yeah, that is all stairs, which is interesting to think about since Main Street Station has a lot of the like reserved handicaps viewing areas for like fireworks and such.
No, I think that might be VIP viewing up there.
I thought it was handicapped. They do have reserved viewing areas up there
Yeah,
for
I'm pretty sure it's for
special events.
VIP because there's no ramp up there and
Yeah,
there's
so it
no
couldn't be handicapped.
right. Yeah, so if you are in a wheelchair and you are trying to get on the train, you cannot get on the train at Main Street Station at Disneyland. You have to go to another station.
That's kind of annoying.
Yes.
Like, I know for us, if we were over at New Orleans Square or at Toontown or Tomorrowland, they're like, we're kind of done for the day. Let's hop on the train and take that to Main Street to get out. Can't do that if you're in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Because if
Not
there's
a,
no ramp up, there's no ramp down, so you can't get
yeah.
out.
Yeah. You're gonna have to hoof it. Well, be pushed, I guess. Wheel it. And I'll be honest, I did not look it up for Walt Disney World. I just remember that like sticks out to me at Disneyland. Yeah, I always thought that was interesting. But for stroller pushing friends, I always avoided taking the train because it was just a pain. You either have to leave your stroller or fold it and then finagle your kid onto the train. And I was like, I don't really want to do that. So, yeah. All right. Well, with that, I think it's time for the final showdown on the train.
Yeah.
Are you ready for this?
I better be.
This is really hard. Again, okay, so now that we've got the facts laid out, it's time for our final showdown.
Da-da-da-da.
Ta-da! Can we see eye to eye? Does one side stand out above the crowd? Allie, tell me your thoughts on the train.
Okay, before I do, we talked earlier about breaking it into two categories. We're doing the train as a ride and the
Yeah,
train as a form of transportation. And we'll be
yeah,
doing the same thing for the monorail too.
yes.
So, as a ride, I am going to give it to Disneyland because there's a lot more to look at. It's more than just a circle now because you turn left. And the seating configuration, you're likely to get, the seating configuration is 50-50 chance, but you could get side-facing seating to where you can actually see everything and it's designed like a ride. So as a ride, I will give it to Disneyland.
Okay.
As a form of transportation, I'm going to give it to Disney World because Disney World is so much bigger that it feels so much more necessary. If you have your Genie Plus Lightning Lane reservation halfway across the park and your feet hurt, well, you can just hop on the train and, hopefully get there a little bit quicker and a lot less painfully for your feet.
Okay. So, for me, for a ride, okay, if I'm judging which one's a better ride, I am going to also give it to Disneyland for similar reasons that you did. They have put a lot of effort into adding show scenes and making it entertaining. And I think by adding in train cars that have you facing away from the berm towards the inside of the park, they're trying to make it entertaining. Like they're doing that for a very specific reason. So they're trying to make it an attraction for you, not just a form of transportation. And as a form of transportation, this is where I am struggling really hard.
It's not
Um,
easy.
it's not. Um, hmm. Whew. Man, I think I'm going to. Oh my gosh. I'm really struggling on this one. This is really hard for me. I think I'm going to give it to Disneyland too, actually, on this one. I think the fact that it's 4 stations is telling me that they want you to use it to get from point A. They're giving you a lot of stations to choose from. They want you
Mhm.
to move around the park. Not that Magic Kingdom doesn't want you to move around the park, but Disneyland wants people on and off, on and off, on and off, getting from point A to point B. Magic Kingdom, I don't know. I every time I've been on the train, it's been really slow to load and I've had to wait for a couple trains, you know? Like I feel like people use it as a ride more than they do as a form of transportation. I would like to use it as a form of transportation. I just don't think that it always works out. And I feel like the amount of time that I would take walking from point A to point B, like, it just doesn't work out always. It's almost less time to walk just because it takes forever to load the train. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. And as I was explaining my reasoning for my choice of Magic Kingdom, I thought of a lot of the points that you made, not necessarily the fact that Magic Kingdom seems to be a lot slower to load because I haven't been on it in
Hmm.
but
Yeah. I mean, it's
the
been a
fact that
while
there's
since
more
I've,
stations and
yeah. Yeah, I think Disneyland tries to get people to, I think they have more stations possibly to get people to use it as a form of transportation, right? They don't have wide walkways. It's a smaller park, and having more stations gives people the option to use that as a form of transportation to get people out of the streets, you know?
yes.
So I think it makes sense as a form of transportation. Magic Kingdom can accommodate more people. They have the wider walkways, so you don't have to use it as a form of transportation. It's not a bad form of transportation. I just think Disneyland serves a better purpose as a form of transportation. Not all the
Yes.
time, because you've been there with me where we've looked at the line for the train and have been, nope, it's not worth it to wait in this line.
Yeah, especially I feel like Toontown Station gets that way the most out of all the
Oh,
stations.
Toontown and New Orleans Square, they both have that capability for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Tomorrowland, not so much. Main Street, not so much. But New Orleans Square and Toontown can get really, really backed up for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of where I come down on that. It's a hard decision.
Yes.
All right, with that, let's
Let's
move
turn
on.
left.
Let's turn left to the monorail. I know it seems weird to pair these two together, but they're both rides and forms of transportation. So let's get into the monorail. Allie, what's your favorite thing about the monorail at Disneyland and Walt Disney World?
So at Disneyland, I love that it's a way to get into the Disneyland park. Like, okay, at Disney World, you take it to Magic Kingdom, but you don't take it into Magic Kingdom. So I just think that's a really cool thing that they do. It's a way to get into the park. So that's really cool. Monorail at Disney World, I like that it's a viable form of transportation. There's so many stops. It's not just going from point A to point B. It's going from point A to point B to point C to point D to point Z.
That's a good point. So for me at Disneyland, I love that it's a great way to preview the day at both parks. If you're, I know you need a park ticket to ride the monorail. Unfortunately, that's I think is its downfall at Disneyland.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I love that it goes through Disneyland and DCA and Downtown Disney. You can see very quick glimpses of all three of those locations, but I love that you do get to see quick glimpses of that. I think that's really awesome. It gives you that little bit of excitement, that little taste of Disney. And at Walt Disney World, I agree with you. I think it's a fantastic form of transportation throughout. at least half of the resort because you've got Magic Kingdom and Epcot there, and you've also got the Magic Kingdom area resorts right there. And I also love that it's stroller and wheelchair friendly. You can just roll right on, and you don't have to wake the kids out of the stroller. You just roll right on. That's very convenient. Speaking as a mom who has had sleeping kids in the stroller. All right, let's talk about opening dates. Allie, when did monorail open at Disneyland?
Well, June 1959 was a big year for Disneyland, or a big month for Disneyland, and the monorail is part of that. The monorail opened on June 14th, 1959, and will be celebrating its 63rd birthday a month from date of recording.
That's pretty awesome. I feel like the monorail is, how do I put this? It's like kind of put on a pedestal in Disney lore, Disney merchandising. Like, I feel like it's just not going to go away. It's one of those classic Disney things,
You call it a pedestal, I call it an elevated railway, tomato,
monorail
tomato.
beam. You know what I mean? Like, there's monorail
Yeah.
plushies and monorail like dog toys. I've seen monorail like chew dog toys, Like,
Well, it's iconic.
it is. Yeah, it's very
Looking
cool.
at my mouse pad, a Disneyland mouse pad from when you were a cast member, because I picked it up at the cast
really?
store. The monorail is featured prominently.
Yeah, I mean, the train is obviously a classic opening day attraction for both coasts, but you can see a train all over the place, right? But monorail, that's very cool. It's just very sleek. So Walt Disney World, it was an opening day attraction, October 1st, 1971. It has 3 lines at Walt Disney World. So the Epcot line was added in 1982, and then the Grand Floridian stop, there's a stop at that resort that was added in 1988. So they've expanded it over the years. But yeah, so fun facts about the monorail. Allie, what are some fun facts about Disneyland's monorail?
So in December of 1986, the Disneyland monorail system was named a National Historic Mechanical Engineering Landmark. Say that 5 times fast.
Yeah, there's that little like bronze plaque on the platform at Tomorrowland.
In Tomorrowland, yeah. And it's really cool because there's not a lot of things that have that designation. I think I read that it's like less than 300 things have that designation.
Oh, cool.
So it's kind of a big deal. As of 2022, you can ride in the front if you ask nicely and the cast member says yes. In 1959, when it opened, Imagineer Bob Gurr accidentally kidnapped the then Vice President Richard Nixon on the monorail. So Nixon's children did the ribbon cutting. They attempted to. Nobody made sure that the scissors were actually sharp enough, so they attempted to ribbon cut, and then Walt Disney ended up just ripping the ribbon. They loaded on the monorail, and Walt Disney said, "Let's go." And so Bob Gurr said, "Okie dokie," and he took off, and then he looks and he realizes the Vice President's Secret Service men are still standing on the platform.
Nice.
So they do their round trip. They come up, and the children said, "That was so much fun. Let's do it again." And Walt Disney said, "Let's do it again." And Bob Gurr said, "Okay." And he took off from the station. The doors never opened. Secret Service members could not get on board, although apparently they tried to chase the monorail to get on board.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's the story of how Bob Gurr accidentally kidnapped the Vice President on Walt Disney's orders.
That's like a classic Bob Gurr story.
Yes, and CJ, you mentioned that you have actually heard Bob Gurr recounting this tale.
Yes.
So it is a true story.
Yes, I've had the pleasure of seeing and hearing Bob Gurr multiple times, twice in the last 6 months. He's been doing a lot of events for Disney World's 50th anniversary. So he told the story back in like November. He was speaking. There was like a $7 ticket to go see him at this random hotel down in Kissimmee. He was doing just a Q&A, and he happened to tell this story. So that was really cool. And for our listeners who don't know, Bob Gurr is legendary Imagineer. He designed pretty much everything on wheels at Disneyland, like most of the Main Street vehicles, the monorail, the Doom buggies on the Haunted Mansion, the Matterhorn, Autopia cars. Yeah, he's very, very well known in the Disney community. He's a Disney legend, like very nice guy, and he's still alive. He's in his 90s now. So
wow.
Yeah, he's still alive and kicking and going to Disney events and doing cool stuff. Apparently, he has a flight simulator in his house, and like that's what he does for fun. He like flies around in his flight simulator.
That's cool. I bet that
Yeah.
came in handy in 2020.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. So yeah, if you get the chance to see him, highly recommend it. I have another Bob Gurr story about Walt Disney World's monorail, which I'll share here in a little bit. So some facts. One is not so fun of a fact. So facts about the Walt Disney World monorail. You can no longer sit in the front of the Walt Disney World monorail. Unfortunately, there was an accident, a fatal accident in 2009 involving the pink and purple monorails. So those two monorail colors have been retired. And that's why you can't sit in the front anymore, basically. You can't ride in the front anymore. You can ask to briefly sit in the front car. A couple weeks ago, actually, I was at Magic Kingdom with a friend, and the monorail pilot, we were holding at the station. They wouldn't let us board. There was traffic up ahead. The captain said, "Hey, do you guys want to sit in front really quick?" And we were like, "Oh, you can do that?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll take your picture. As long as we're holding, you can sit up front." Okay, so they let us sit in the captain's seat and took our picture. So apparently you can sit in the front really quick for a brief picture, but you cannot ride in the front anymore. So that's the story on that. They also have trading cards, transportation themed trading cards you can ask for. They may not have them on hand, but they do exist. They are out there. So here's my fun Bob Gurr story, which I have also heard him tell in person. So this is a true story. The monorail passes through the Contemporary Resort at the Walt Disney World Resort. It's kind of like a tent-shaped structure, and the monorail goes right through it and stops at the resort there. The structural engineers were concerned about the monorail going through it. They thought it would cause some sort of structural issue, and Bob Gurr was like, "No, it's fine. Everything's totally fine." So Bob decided to bolt a seismograph to the beam to prove that everything was fine. And so he didn't go through at the normal 5 miles per hour. He went through at 43 miles per hour, like full speed. And the seismograph registered no shaking. And just to prove that it was totally fine, he went through 2 times more just to be sure. And he had like the time of his life going through at 43 miles an hour.
That is street speeds. That's so fun.
I know I would love to be a part of that test, but apparently, I mean, Bob Gurr, designer of the monorail, he must have had the time of his life just
Yeah.
ripping through the Contemporary at 43 miles an hour.
Bob Gurr's Rip Ride Rocket. Oh wait, wrong theme park.
So now that we've gone over some facts here about both coast monorails, let's talk about the number of trains. Allie, how many trains does Monorail Disneyland have?
Well, I think it's worth noting that there's not a lot of track at Disneyland Monorail compared to Disney World Monorail. As a result, there are 3 trains: Monorail Red, Monorail Blue, and Monorail Orange. And it is Mark 7 as of 2008.
Yeah, here at Walt Disney World, we're on Mark 6, which we've been using since 1989. It is a well-known fact that we are long overdue for an upgraded monorail system. There was this interesting rumor started in like 2020, I think, that a new monorail was coming. I think it was based on some of the concept art for the Play Pavilion. It said something about like Mark 10 coming in 2020, whatever. I saw it very briefly and I thought, that's interesting. And then Bob Gurr said something that about Walt Disney World has ordered more monorails. I don't know if that's true. There's rumors floating around, and then COVID happened. So, I mean, who knows what's happening? But anyways, that's the rumor on that. So we've been on Mark 6 since 1989. There are 6 cars per train, making for a total of 203.5 feet in length. There are 12 trains, and they are all different colors: red, coral, orange, gold, yellow, lime, green, blue, silver, black, teal, and peach. Purple and pink have been retired. The middle cars that could be salvaged from purple and pink make up teal and peach. So they made those new colors out of purple and pink. So, yep. So let's talk about speeds and travel time and track length and all that good stuff.
So the monorail track at Disneyland is 2.5 miles. It'll take you 10 minutes and 30 seconds thereabouts to ride the whole thing. That doesn't count any time stopped at the stations. And you had a maximum speed of 30 miles an hour.
One thing I want to note about Disneyland that doesn't happen that I've seen at Walt Disney World is sometimes ducks land on the track.
Yes, that's actually one of the instances where the monorail will honk its horn, is if there is a bird on the track, it will honk because nobody wants to run over a duck at a theme park. That's horrifying.
Yes, and it usually happens around like Small World or Matterhorn.
Yeah.
There's a lot of water around there.
Yeah.
Yep. So at Walt Disney World, it was really hard to find exactly how fast it goes. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 55 miles an hour. Of course, it depends where on the track it is. I mean, if you're right around the resort, it's going to go slower than that, obviously. But there's 14.7 miles total of track length. So pretty long compared to Disneyland.
Yeah, you could run an entire half marathon and then some just following monorail tracks at Disney World, where Disneyland, that's not even a 5K.
Yeah. Yep. And there are 3 different lines that you can get on. There's the express line, which takes about 5 to 7 minutes. The resort line takes about 15 to 20. It's the same route as the express line, but it just takes longer because it stops at each resort and they got to load people and unload and all that. And then the Epcot line takes about 15 minutes.
Yeah, so let's talk about the number of stops, because obviously that makes a difference for the length of the ride, as you just mentioned. So the Disneyland Resort has 2 stops. There's one in downtown Disney, and the other one is in Tomorrowland above the Finding Nemo submarine voyage.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about Disneyland that I don't see too much at Walt Disney World. Disneyland does a great job with layering things vertically. We talked about it once before. I want to say maybe first season when we talked about how Alice in Wonderland and Mr. Toad exist like on top of each other.
Yeah.
Nemo and Monorail like exist on top of each other.
Yeah.
You know,
You're hand jiving over there.
I'm hand jiving. And then when the People Mover was still active in Disneyland, that was another layer that existed in that area too.
Yeah.
Yeah. At Walt Disney World, like I said, there's 3 lines. The express line just goes from the Ticket and Transportation Center to the entry of Magic Kingdom. For our listeners who don't know, the Ticket and Transportation Center is like the hub of Magic Kingdom, kind of. It's when you park at Magic Kingdom, you're not parking right in front of Magic Kingdom. You're parking at the Ticket and Transportation Center. And from there, you can get on a monorail or a boat, or I guess you can walk the long route to Magic Kingdom. So yeah, you can get on the express line to the Magic Kingdom. You can get on the resort line, which takes you to or from the Ticket and Transportation Center to the Polynesian, to the Grand Floridian, to the Magic Kingdom, to the Contemporary, back to the Ticket and Transportation Center. Or you can get on the Epcot line, which takes you from the Ticket and Transportation Center to Epcot and then back. So let's say you're staying at the Grand Floridian and you wanted to go to Epcot. So to get from Grand Floridian to Epcot, you would hop on at the Grand Floridian on the monorail, and you would go on the monorail to Magic Kingdom, then to Contemporary, then get off at the Ticket and Transportation Center, then transfer to the Epcot line to Epcot. So it's kind of like if you're in a big city like New York City or Boston or DC and you're navigating the metro system, only you're navigating the monorail. Yeah, and there's only 3 lines you have to navigate. If you were staying at a resort and you're trying to get to Magic Kingdom, let's say you're staying at the Polynesian, you just hop on the monorail and you just wait until you get off at the Magic Kingdom, or you can take a boat from your resort, or you could walk.
Yeah, it's very convenient.
It is.
For those resort guests.
Totally. Yep. So, Alli, let's talk about what you can see on the route.
Yeah, so the monorail at Disneyland is narrated, much like the train is. So from the downtown Disney station, you get, and I quote, "a bird's eye look at the downtown Disney District, the Grand Californian Hotel and Spa, and Disney California Adventure Park. To the left of the monorail is the Disneyland main entrance."
Wow, I can hear that in the narrator's voice.
Yeah,
it's like,
you can hear the narrator voice saying that. You can also see the Main Street train station. Then you pass the transportation plaza where there's taxis, hotel shuttles, rideshare, drop off and pick up and public transit stops. You go along Harbor Boulevard where you can see some hotels, then into Disneyland around Autopia and Tomorrowland. You go over the submarine lagoon, past the Matterhorn, back over Autopia and the railroad train tracks. Then you get a nice view of It's a Small World. You turn left towards Fantasyland. You get a view of the Storybook Land canals, the Mad Tea Party, and Alice in Wonderland before passing by the Matterhorn again, then pulling into the Tomorrowland station above the submarine lagoon.
Yeah, this is, you know, we talk about how compact Disneyland is, and I think the monorail being only 2.5 miles, and you get to see all of this. And that's just the Disneyland, or the route from downtown Disney to Disneyland, and you get to see all of that on your route.
Yeah.
What do you see from Tomorrowland back to downtown Disney?
Much less. So you exit the park, you go down Harbor Boulevard, you get the view of those hotels again, and you go into California Adventure. You enter near the Monsters, Inc. attraction and actually go behind the facade for it. Then you go over Buena Vista Street, over and behind Soarin' Over California, then through the Grand Californian. You do not go into the interior of the hotel like you do at the Contemporary. You go through a tunnel and you go over a courtyard and then into another tunnel. And then when you pop out, you're going over Disneyland Drive, make a turn and past the Lego store, and then you're back at the downtown Disney station.
Yeah, that just goes to show you how compact Disneyland is. You see all that in 2.5 miles.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very quick trip, but I really love the views. It's really pretty.
It's fun.
I love when you time it right. So when you're going by the Matterhorn, you get to see a bobsled go by.
Yeah.
Or when you get to see some of the caterpillars from Alice in Wonderland go by. That's really fun too.
The ride through that I watched of the monorail, it was posted by 4K WDW.
Oh, I love them too. We watch them a lot too.
So they actually they went over a train as the train they crossed paths with the train. The other thing is that it goes over the parade route or very close to the parade route. So if you time it right, you can't see an entire parade because you're in a moving vehicle, but you can see parts of a parade.
Yeah, it's a really great view for sure. So at Walt Disney World, I'm going to break this up into the different lines. The trip is narrated as well for all of the lines that you go on. The Express line, you start at the Ticket and Transportation Center and you just go straight to Magic Kingdom. It travels through the Contemporary, just straight through to Magic Kingdom. It does slow down through the Contemporary Resort. It doesn't go through at 43 miles per hour. Yep. And basically you get a bird's eye view of the lake. You can see Magic Kingdom out in the distance. And it's really fun to go through there, especially with little kids and first timers. They're like, oh, the castle, oh, Space Mountain. And, you just hear their excitement. Out in the distance, you can see other resorts. You can catch a glimpse of like the Wilderness Lodge and some of the taller, like non-Disney owned resorts off in the distance. And you kind of see the surrounding area of Magic Kingdom. And then the resort line actually takes the same route as the express line. I'm sorry, when you take the express line back, you just go the other way, basically. So it takes the same route as the express line, but you're stopping at resorts. So your eyes linger a little longer, especially over the resorts. You can check out the pool area and just kind of linger a little longer, basically, because you're stopping at each of those resorts and people load and unload. So the Epcot line goes from the Ticket and Transportation Center to Epcot and back, but it goes inside Epcot, even though the station is outside. So you get a bird's eye view of Epcot. So the way that it goes is you pass over part of the Magic Kingdom parking lot so you can look for your car when you're going over. You travel down World Drive and then you enter Epcot at the main entry. You head past Spaceship Earth so you can get a view of the fountain that was unveiled like a year or so ago and see kind of the new entryway. You can get a glimpse of the new Cosmic Rewind ride area. You can take a look at the test track entry. You get a view of part of World Showcase kind of off in the distance. And right now you can see all the construction going on behind Spaceship Earth. Then you kind of make a big turn and over to the left you can see the Imagination Pavilion, the Land Pavilion, the Seas Pavilion. You see more construction going on by Spaceship Earth. Then you pop out back in front of Spaceship Earth again and you can see the entry. And then you park at the station, unload, load, and then you head back over the Epcot parking lot, back to Magic Kingdom, back to the Ticket and Transportation Center, and you park there and then it goes back to Epcot again. So yeah, it's a nice drive. Sometimes we like if we can't get a park reservation and we just need to get out of the house, we'll go park at Magic Kingdom and ride the monorail around. And I mean, by the time we park and walk there and get through security and all that, like it's a good hour out of our day to go through that whole thing. So let's talk about seating arrangements because this is a big difference between the two.
Yeah, so for Disneyland, I want you to think of a dumbbell where you got the weights and the bar that's supporting the weights. So where the weights are, there are benches that are facing each other. And then that bar, there's also a bench where people sit back to back. There's space to walk between the weights and the bar because we don't want people jumping over seats, and it needs to be navigable, and let's all be decent human beings. There's no standing allowed. You must be seated. Strollers must be folded. Wheelchairs and ECVs are allowed on, though. And one thing that, as you were talking about the routes, I started thinking there's only doors on one side of the monorail at Disneyland, which is different from Disney World.
Yeah. So they only load on one side, and there's just like a tiny door on either side. It's just a single door that opens up on both ends of the car, and you just single file into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas at at Walt Disney World, it's like two sets of double doors open on both sides of the car.
Yeah. So you get in on one side and exit the other.
Yeah.
And you can walk right through it.
Yeah, it's really designed. It's really designed to move people and hold a lot of people. So standing is allowed in the cars, and there's like poles there to hang on to, like a metro or a subway car would have. Strollers and wheelchairs can roll right on. It's no problem. Seating there's 2 rows, like Alli was mentioning, like the dumbbell kind of thing, which like there's no middle section, like what your hands would hold on to if it was a dumbbell, if that makes sense. Like there's just those seats on the end, and then there's a set of seats in the middle facing the end seats.
So you've got a front and a back, and then a back and a front.
Yeah, pretty much. There's no seats facing the windows like there are at Disneyland. So yeah, it's designed to hold a lot more people than Disneyland, I think.
Which I find that really interesting, because thinking about the cars at Disneyland versus the cars at Magic Kingdom, I almost feel like I could fit more people at Disneyland, except for the fact that people can stand up at Magic Kingdom at Disney World.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Because you can fit 4 to a bench at Disney World, and there's 4 benches on each car, and you can fit 4 on the front and back facing benches at Disneyland,
and like
you can fit on 6 to 8 on either side of the middle bench.
A small 8, I would say.
Yeah, an 8 if you have a couple of children.
Yeah. I also think the curves on Disneyland's are, I don't know what the right word is. The curves on the track seem more intense.
They're like sharper turns.
Yeah, which is probably why they don't allow standing. I feel like people would fall over.
Yeah.
They would 100% fall over.
Yeah.
Huh. All right, well, I think it's time for the final showdown on the monorail.
I think so too.
Do we see eye to eye? Does one side stand out above the crowd? Alli, tell me your thoughts. Which monorail is a better ride, and which one is a better form of transportation?
So it's very, very clear cut to me. As a ride, Disneyland, because it was built to be a ride. You get to see so much. You get to see the inside of Disneyland. You get to see the inside of California Adventure. You can do a round trip. You don't have to get off at either of the stops. It feels like it was built to be a ride. As a form of transportation, on the other hand, Walt Disney World feels like it was built to be a form of transportation. It's really, really easy to use it to get from point A to point B. And I mean, I know that you and I have been on, when I was visiting, you and I went on the monorail just because we could. But like, tourists don't do that. Tourists don't ride the monorail necessarily just because they can. If you're here for the parks, I feel like you're going on the rides and then you're like, oh, time to get on the monorail so we can get back to our hotel. Not time to get on the monorail because it's a fun ride. So for me, Ride goes to Disneyland. Form of transportation goes to Disney World.
Okay, I'm going to agree with you, but I have
Different reasons?
I have a bit of a disagreement. So at Disneyland, I do agree that it is a better ride than at Walt Disney World. But I do think initially it was built as a form of transportation because when the Disneyland Hotel was built, I'm sorry, Disneyland Hotel was built before the monorail came about. But there was a stop before the Disneyland Hotel, things have moved around. There was a station at the Disneyland Hotel, so it did serve as a better form of transportation than it is right now.
Okay,
So,
I will give you that.
yes.
And I know that Walt's original intent was for it to be a form of transportation, not just in the park, but in like all of Orange County. Like I believe he wanted to build a monorail from the airport to
Oh yeah,
Disneyland.
he had like grand plans for this
Yeah.
monorail, and
And
I
Orange
mean,
County said nah.
yeah, I mean, if you look at like his original plans for Epcot, like Epcot, the experimental prototype community of tomorrow, not Epcot, the park we know it today, like the monorail plays a very big role in people moving, right? Like
Yeah.
as a form of transportation. Um, but I think in its current iteration, the monorail as a ride exists in a better form at Disneyland than it does at Walt Disney World. And I mean, we talked about the way that the benches face. They face outward looking at the windows, and they give you a
Yeah.
lot of eye candy to look at. I just think it exists as a ride so much better at Disneyland. And you're right, you don't have to get off. Like there's no, I mean, unless you're going to the hotel or
You can ride the monorail all day without getting off.
yeah, I mean, unless you're going to dine somewhere specific, there's no really reason to get off. I mean, sometimes, if you're walking back to the parking structure or something, sure, you can get off if you want to, but
Yeah.
meh, I don't know. I think it's a better ride than it is a form of transportation in the way that it exists right now.
Yes.
Walt Disney World, I agree with you. It's a much better form of transportation than it is a ride. My son would probably disagree. He thinks it's the best ride. If we don't go on the monorail, there's like Meltdown City, but
Yeah, but he's also 3.5, so
yes. But yeah, it's a great form of transportation and it really helps serve to move people around. And I'll go back to the way that the ride vehicles are designed. They're designed with holding a lot of people in mind and the way the station platforms are designed. Like you talked about, you go in one door and out the other. Like that's to get people moving and to keep the flow of people flowing consistently.
yeah.
It just makes sense as a form of transportation, and Walt Disney World pretty much has that down. However, why are we still using monorail cars from 1989? Why has there not been an update? They are feeling old and tired, and recently they like refurbished the interior. Which really just means like putting new carpeted walls on there. They like updated the wall carpet. They look
Ew.
nice. I know it's wall carpet. It's a thing out here in Florida. I don't know why. But mechanically, I feel like they might need some help. So I would like to see some changes to the Walt Disney World monorail to make it an even more efficient form of transportation.
All right. For the most part, we have seen eye to eye this episode.
Yeah, the railroad was a little touchy, but
Yeah, but I don't disagree with anything that you said about the railroad.
say and
So,
and likewise, and likewise. Cool. Well, why don't you talk about what we're doing next episode? Oh, wait. I'm sorry. We have listener feedback. A couple of my friends from a Facebook group that I'm in have shared that they're really enjoying the podcast so far. So thank you for listening in, and I hope you guys continue listening.
yeah, thank you all for listening. We
Yes.
appreciate it.
Yes.
Now, CJ, do you ever feel like you just talk in circles?
Sometimes I do.
Yeah, because that's what we'll be doing on our next episode, talking in circles the entire time. We're going to talk about the carousel, we're going to talk about the teacups, we're going to talk about Dumbo.
Wow. That's very circular.
It is. We're just going to go round and round about it.
Roundabout. I was trying to make a joke out of roundabouts. I don't think it worked.
Not quite, not quite. That's okay.
So, yeah, these are also classic attractions: the carousel, the Mad Tea Party, and Dumbo.
Yeah.
And they all go around.
Yeah.
They make
We're gonna
the
talk in
world
circles.
and the land go round.
The world of color go around. World is a carousel of color, CJ.
It's a carousel of color.
Wonderful, beautiful color.
Yes. All right. Well, I think that's it for this episode. You can come find us on Instagram and supposedly, allegedly on Twitter at Park2Park Pod with the number 2. You can send us feedback, future episode ideas, and more at park2parkpod@gmail.com. And we're going to be looking for special guests to be on our show at some point in the future. We have not decided yet if we'll have mid-season guests or end-of-season guests.
Or both.
Or both. But if you're interested in being a guest to talk about any of the topics that we've talked about thus far, keep your eyes out or keep your ears open, I guess,
or just reach out to us.
Reach out to us, yeah, if you would like to be a
Don't
guest.
wait for us to ask you. You ask us.
Yes. Yeah, so if you want to be a guest, let us know. And you can come chat with us about which coast does certain rides and attractions better. And yeah, I think that's it, right? Do we have anything else?
Like and subscribe and leave us a review.
Smash that subscribe button on YouTube.
Yeah.
That's what the YouTubers say.
Yeah, that's what the youths say. The youth tubers.
Yes.
Is that a thing?
I guess so. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Bye, y'all.